Good evening, everyone. I'm your host, comedian, magician, Danny Whitson. But it's all tricks aside, because tonight we're turning the paranormal into the normal. Join me as we explore the gray areas of reality. We're going to talk all things paranormal, UFOs, ghosts, cryptids, and aliens, and see how it's all connected. This podcast is brought to you by the Experiencer Support Association, and we are live. So if you're an experiencer yourself, or you're just plain nosy, be sure to send me your question and subscribe to the podcast. Now, get ready, because it's going to get deep. No, really, we're going to go way out there, because this is Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. What's happening, my paranormal junkies? Welcome to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat, and I'm your host, comedian magician Danny Whitson, and we are broadcasting live from the E-United Public Radio Network, the UFO Paranormal Radio Network, 105.3 FM on the Gulf Coast and 107.7 in New Orleans. Guys, we got a fantastic show, but first, before we begin, I would like to give a huge shout out. Mondays, if you haven't done this, every Monday at 5 p.m. Eastern, check out Ryan Stacy's show, The Skeptical Sleuth. He breaks down a lot of investigations, makes it easy to understand, kind of gives his point of view. Very interesting stuff. Be sure to check it out. Also, if you guys have not done so yet, head over to Patreon to Heed the World at patreon.com, Heed the World, and show us some love. A little $4 donation will get you access to some really cool information, some really cool stories, some things that Ryan has investigated on his own. Only $4 over at Patreon. Show us some love. Also, if you haven't done so, be sure to like, subscribe, share the podcast, tell your friends. Check us out anywhere you listen to podcasts. We're there, but especially here at YouTube. All right? Be sure to like and share. It all helps, okay? All right, guys. I'm ready for tonight's guest. Actually, this is a friend of mine. I've known this guy for a while. He's very interesting, very talented, has done a lot of cool things. He's an actor, an award-winning author, a composer, a producer of the upcoming DarkHouse Entertainment film Blood Splatter. All right? So let's welcome tonight's guest, Blake Best.
Hi. Hey, Danny. How are you?
What's happening, man? Welcome to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited. It's good to see you. It's been far too long.
It has, man. It has. Well, most of the time I see you're behind the table signing books, for folks. But I tell you what, if you don't care, just will you let the viewers just know a little bit more about yourself?
Sure. So first of all, I want to say thank you to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat for having me, and also the Experiencer Support Association. I'm excited to be here. It's great to be here and be part of your antics, because I know I'm always going to be entertained when I'm with you. So, so thank you for having me. So a little bit about me. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee, originally born and raised. I am an actor, an author, a composer, a producer, a songwriter. I've done lots of different things, lots of different mediums. I toured the country, part of a big time rock and roll and metal band. I got to see the world. I got to write books, screenwrite, work in film, especially horror. I really enjoy working in the horror genre. Probably what I'm best known for is the books I've done on Nightmare on Elm Street, and then of course some of my possession stuff. And then I did a book on the Loch Ness Monster called Fathom. So if it's creepy or cryptids or unexplained or horror things, then I'm all over it.
I love the fact I didn't know that though, Blake. First of all, guys, Blake, he's like a guru for Nightmare on Elm Street. First of all, and the book, that he wrote on Nightmare on Elm Street, which was, it's an awesome book if you can find it, because I know what's the name of that book, by the way?
Razor's Edge.
The Razor's Edge. Actually, I've got a copy. It's tough to find. It's now tough to find, isn't it?
It's pretty tough to find. It's hard to keep copies in. If you can find a first edition copy, they go for about $2,000 to $3,000 on Amazon.
That is awesome. But also, I had no clue about the Loch Ness Monster book. And I'm always looking for people to come on to talk about stuff like that. So definitely unexpected. We're going to have to hear some stuff about that. But first, how did writing, Nightmare on Elm Street, how did that kind of happen for you?
It sort of happened as well. Honestly, it was more of a being a fan and growing up seeing all the films. I remember each film means something different to me. Some I saw on my birthday. Like Wes Craven's New Nightmare came out when I turned 9, and then some I saw when the pay-per-view was a thing way back when. So each one of them has a kind of a special thing. But I noticed through all of them there was a touch on Freddy's backstory, that origin, which people like, but it wasn't done in any real detailed degree as far as so the victims that he took he dispatched when he was alive, that got him arrested in the first place, those weren't really covered, and then how he built the glove, how he came up with that idea, and sort of his thought process, because I mean, you're in a the mind of a psychopath here. So obviously, Nightmare on Elm Street and Freddy Krueger especially have become synonymous with horror, and they are I mean, he is one of horror's preeminent icons. I mean, when you think of like the Mount Rushmore of horror, you think of Freddy, Jason, Michael Myers, so, and several others. Like, but Freddy is always in that pantheon. So I wanted to kind of delve into that backstory and kind of tell a little bit more about what it was like for him to do what he did, how he tried to juggle a personal life. He was married and had a daughter. On top of doing what he called his special interest area, as it were, and basically he was a serial killer. He was a and he kidnapped children, and he used the guise of an ice cream man to deliver ice cream in order to select his victims, and then he would choose the ones that he wanted, and then he would take them, and then well, it never ended up very well for any of them. So that story, and then the story of how he ended up getting away with it at first, which is rooted in reality. Um, Oftentimes, when it comes to that story, people want to know, well, why did he end up getting away with it? And it's because the law enforcement in that town in Springwood performed an illegal search and seizure on his workplace. So anything they found was purely inadmissible in the court of law, whether it was hair bows or the glove itself, this particular item, or anything like that. If they found it without a search warrant, they couldn't use it. And they also didn't read him his Miranda rights. They roughed him up a bit, threw him in the police car, and took him to jail. And that's not okay either. You can't rough people up and do that kind of thing. And it does not excuse what he did, but that is still something very rooted in reality. Um, Police have to have a search warrant when they go investigate a property or a house or anything like that, and then you have to have your Miranda rights read to you, so that you understand anything that you say can and will be used against you in the court of law. And they didn't even tell him that he would have a public defender provided for him or anything. So the judge, Gwen Francesca, says, "I'm sorry as you all are about this, but if proper procedure had been followed, this never would have happened. I have no choice but to let him go."
So
And that
now
upset the parents.
you did, because I mean, this is Geek Out City with Freddy Krueger and Nightmare, which is cool. But so you did this kind of like, it was a backstory kind of stuff that you had kind of put together yourself. I mean, I mean, were you always kind of like a writer?
I was always a writer. Early on, I was into things like cryptids and unexplained aerial phenomena, things we'll talk about later on the show. Lots of paranormal things. I was always into that. But this was basically bits and pieces of his backstory put together, and then I also did the unthinkable, and I connected the first 6 films, so Nightmares 1 through 5, and then Freddy's Dead. That's my book, as far as I'm aware, was the first book to actually connect all of those films together. Even if it was by way of mentioning parents that were part of the mob that ended up taking law into their own hands, in respect to him. They were parents of children that he would end up confronting in later movies. So I kind of bridged that gap together. A perfect example of this is there is a specific character in the book that's referenced briefly. He's transferred to a hospital for injuring himself, and he's mentioned in passing in Nightmare on Elm Street 3 as being one of the kids that Dr. Gordon, quote unquote, lost to Fairview due to this particular incident. So again, I'm bridging Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3 in with this backstory and kind of connecting all of that together. I also introduce his mother and kind of that backstory, the circumstances surrounding his birth and surrounding his adoption, because he was given up for adoption. His mother was a nun and was in the convent, and they looked down upon a nun having a child out of wedlock, despite the circumstances, which we won't get into here, obviously. But that sort of connected all those things together. So a friend of mine wrote a series of comic books in the '90s, Andy Mangles, and they were called Nightmares on Elm Street. And in this, he kind of explored some of the backstory things. And he had a list of names of these children. There were 20 that Freddy ended up, through his 5-year reign of terror, that he ended up more or less dispatching. And so I took those names, I gave them all parents, I gave them all ages, and gave them all different ways by which they were going to be dispatched. And that sort of told all of that backstory of what it was like. And two of his victims had siblings, and those siblings were in the first Nightmare on Elm Street, namely Rod Lane and Tina Gray. So they each had a brother or sister that were victims of Freddy's Springwood slasher reign of terror. So that sort of bridges that gap and also connects Lieutenant Thompson, who you know as John Saxon from Nightmares 1 and 3, and how he was involved in this and how he was instrumental in this vigilante mob taking justice into their own hands, because essentially it's it's an allegory. The sins of the parents are visited upon the children. So the parents became the very thing they were trying to get rid of, killers. Um,
That's
and
interesting too, and if I'm not mistaken, wasn't the story kind of portrayed from a real life person?
the story of the idea, rather, of the passing away from your nightmares sort of was a very bizarre set of articles that Wes Craven had stumbled upon in the newspaper. They were not very big features, just a couple of long articles, just a few column inches. And what it was essentially was it was a group of uh, southeastern and Asian refugees coming from places like Korea, Vietnam, immigrating to the United States, escaping persecution in home country, and relocating to America to start, a new life and build a better life. And a series of things happened where these unexplained deaths were happening. Specifically, the one that really got Wes was there was a young man who was about 14 or 15, and his father was a physician, and they immigrated to the United States. And as soon as they immigrated, immediately he started having bad dreams. He wasn't sleeping well. And his father thought he's the new kid in town. We're from a different country. We're located here. It's a little bit of getting used to things, as it were. So he initially wrote it off as he's just going to have to get used to things. He's going to have to find some friends. And the father was as supportive as one could be, but some of that is you want your child to get out and you want them to experience life and you want them to make friends and things like that. So after a few days, he started noticing his child's complexion and his pallor and his just general mood just sank down to nothing, and he was pale and he had dark circles under his eyes, and he wasn't quite sure what was going on. So he went in to the room one day while the son was at school, and he found under the bed that the young man had rigged together a system of extension cords by which were connected three coffee makers that were brewing coffee all the time. So he reasoned that, well, my son's not sleeping. That's part of the problem. So he had a big sit down with his son and said, look, we're going to have to do this different. You can't stay awake and not sleep. And the son kept saying he was terrified of sleeping because he felt like something wasn't right. And his dad was like, it's just because you're in a new country, you're trying to get used to life, it's going to happen. We're here for you. Just try to cope the best you can, and we'll be here to help. Well, after 4 or 5 days of not sleeping. Finally, the father goes to check on the son, and he's in the basement where the TV room is in the house, and he's asleep, like snoring. And the father's like, thank goodness, because he sort of breathes a sort of collective sigh of relief. So he picks his son up, puts him in bed, gets the rest of the house settled, and he goes to bed. Well, after midnight, 1 o'clock, something like that, he hears a bunch of screaming in the house. Jerks him out of sleep. He gets up, he runs, and he finds out this noise is coming from his son's room. His wife is with him in tow, obviously, and they're both terrified. So they get the door open, and they see the son thrashing around in bed, fighting, tearing the covers up, tearing posters off the wall. Things are falling apart. And by the time they get to him, everything goes silent. He stops moving. Father checks him. He's dead. Cold to the touch. And father immediately demanded an autopsy. They did one, and they could find no medical explanation for him to have passed away. No heart condition, no high blood pressure, no diabetes, no extenuating health circumstance that would have predicated his death. And Wes thought, wow, what an unusual thing. What if the nightmare caused it? What if he proverbially hit the ground, like we all have that nightmare of falling? What happens when you hit the ground? Most of us don't know because we wake up beforehand. But what if he didn't?
Wow.
And he kind of ran with that idea. And it's terrifying. We all have to sleep. And the bed itself is scary. You're laying in bed sleeping, but you don't know what's under it. The bed is shadowed. You have no idea what's there. I mean, unless it's on the floor or something.
Absolutely.
But a bed is the place from whence all dreams and nightmares spring.
And
And
life is stranger than fiction.
absolutely. And I've always thought of a friend of mine, John Skip, who was a producer and a screenwriter on Nightmare 5. He always said that he considered Freddy to be an oil slick in the dream pool, sort of this miasma that would move in and out of different windows, different pools, invading the person's privacy, as it were, learning about what scared them the most, taking their fears and using it against them. And I think that's terrifying because, like I said earlier, we all have to sleep. And what if you went to sleep and you saw someone like that? And what if it was a recurring thing every night? What would you do? What would I do? What would we do? You know what we would do? We would become unhinged. Our life would start falling apart because if you don't have sleep, everything else starts to collapse because it's important. It's a health thing. You need it. You need rest. And
You know,
that
one
would
thing
be terrifying.
we talk about a lot about like the sleep paralysis and stuff on this show where people suffer, you know, and a lot of them, you know, it's either two things. They either, you know, they'll have contact with some type of alien type beings, or they have contact almost with like a demon, you know, like a night demon sitting on their
Yeah.
chest, you know, something. So, you know, those things, like I said, you know, real life is stranger than fiction. You know what I mean? So that's I always found that interesting. Now, I do want to change the topic a little bit from the nightmare films. I like you mentioned the Loch Ness monster. I had no clue that you had did a book on the Loch Ness monster. That's something that's one of the creatures that I mean you don't tend to hear as much about as you do with the others like the Bigfoots and some of the other stuff that seems to dominate the spotlight in that area. But the Loch Ness monster, what got you interested in that?
The idea of it. I mean, strictly thinking, we don't know what's at the bottom of the ocean. We don't know what's at the bottom of the lake. You can only see, a few feet below your your own feet and legs. So what if there was something swimming around there? And then, of course, from a scientific standpoint, it's been proven once before things we thought were extinct weren't. Case in point, 1938, there were a group of fishermen off the coast of the Indian Ocean that were swimming for, in pulling in seafood, and they happened to pull in like a 5.5 foot long fish with spikes on it. Nobody had ever seen anything like that before. They immediately were going to throw it away back in the water. They were terrified of it, but they let their curiosity get the better of them. They sent it over to the museums, and it was determined that they had found a live coelacanth, which was supposed to have been extinct for about 45 million years. And they found a whole nest of them swimming in the Indian Ocean. So if that's possible, if something like that can survive and adapt to its ever-changing climate, then I think it's very, very possible that there could be an unknown aquatic reptile like a Nessie, or a champ or whatever you want to call it. There's all these different lake monsters and these
What is the
different
one called as the
Ogopogo in Canada.
Ogopogo? I
Lake
just recently saw some footage of that. This couple was on a sailboat, and
Uh-huh.
they get this amazing picture. It's an amazing picture of a head of something starting to emerge out of the water, and you could tell it's got a body tube that's going down. And I don't know what. First, I thought, well, okay, it could be a log or tree. But then the more I got to look, and they're like, "There's no way this was." I saw this, and I'm just like, "Wow, that's interesting." It because it looks almost exactly like the legend there of what the people have of that in that town in that area of that. So
Absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, and I agree with you. Just like with science, it's very possible. Hell, wasn't it just not that long ago we thought giant squids were made up?
Yes, yes. Ultra squids, colossal squids. Yes, we called the crack.
Yeah,
That's what the Kraken was based
the
off of.
crack exactly, but those bad boys are real.
Yes, and anytime someone would find a tentacle washed up on the shore, like they found one in 1872 and off the coast of Newfoundland, I think the tentacle was 36 feet long, and they were like, "Oh,
That's
there's no
nuts.
way. That's not what you think it is. That's an fish, or that's a this, that's a that." No, it's not. You can't limit yourself by these boundaries because we have not. We will never know exactly what's on every inch of this earth. You just you don't know, and that Fathom, the book on the Loch Ness monster. I mean, I even indicated in my cover. You could see there's a boat, and then there's this giant shape. So my cover artist Heath Helsing designed all my covers, and I saw this and I was like, that's terrifying. What would you do if you
Gosh.
were in a helicopter and you saw this giant shape under the water? This while this other boat was over here hanging out, eating, talking, entertaining, and then you saw all that going on underneath it. Um, so I thought it was a terrifying idea, and um, so of course I turned it into a horror novel. So of course, things don't go as planned. I'm known for my horror work because it's
So
all
the,
the
the
good.
book, it's a horror novel.
It is. It is a horror novel.
That is
But
awesome. First of all, I want to say this. This is why this I haven't seen anything like on the Loch Ness Monster as far as on the horror side. I mean, you know what I
oh,
mean? Like a lot of times when you see stuff like on the lot, it's documentaries, this and this. But as far as an actual story being told, kind of like what you're doing, I mean, we've seen, like I said, we've seen Bigfoot, we've seen these other movies or books about on the horror, but I've never seen that in Loch Ness. I think that's awesome.
There's been a couple. Back in 2001, they had one called Beneath Loch Ness that was a horror film. Then they had a really low budget one in the 80s called the Loch Ness Horror. And then now they've taken that same title and they've released another one that just came out this year called the Loch Ness Horror. And I have seen it, and it's quite good for what it is.
Now,
But
and keep in mind now, Blake, in your world, FYI, I mean, you are that is your world, so you'll see. But the common viewer probably has no clue about any Loch Ness horror movies.
Well, I suggest because they are available on all the services now, streaming and so on and so forth. You can rent them, all that. I would suggest giving them giving them a shot because it really conveys that sense of isolation. Loch Ness is very large. It's 24 miles long, 1 mile wide, and over 750 feet deep in places. And there are some places they've never been to the bottom of. I believe in the late 80s they discovered a spot near Earth York Castle that was 812 feet as opposed to 750 feet. That's quite a difference. There's plenty of room for something to hide.
Absolutely. I think it's very possible, and it wouldn't be shocking at all. And like I said, so many people have seen things, and it's just, you're just wow. So, but I think that's now. Let me. You ever thought about because, like I know you're in the film business too. So you ever thought about maybe turning your book into a film?
I mean, there've been a few independent filmmakers that have thought about it, and honestly, I'm sort of from the second golden age of horror, the special effects. I would want something practical, like a practically built animatronic or a creature or something puppeteered. But in this day and age, CGI seems to be the way to go as far as that stuff goes. But if I was going to do something CGI, I would want it as realistic as possible. But I don't know. I don't know about doing Loch Ness, anything with that as like a film, because I would want to keep it true to life. I would want to go there. I would want to travel to
Absolutely.
Scotland and actually film on the lake. But there was something that happened like that once before, and it seems almost like people believe that the lake is cursed because there was a film that came out in 1970 called The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes, and in it they had an animatronic Nessie built. Something hit it in the water and sank it, and it is still at the bottom of that lake. So they don't know what it was that hit it, but it destroyed it. Later on, they were able to find pieces of it 10 to 15 years later on Operation Deep Scan, I believe is the name of the expedition they were on. But it seems like there's this worry, about it being cursed. So I don't know. I don't know how that would work.
Well, definitely, that would be awesome. I tell you, I think you would do a great job at it if you could make that happen. That would be awesome. But
I appreciate it.
I mean, the one thing though you don't hear, not unless you don't hear a lot of, you do hear this, you hear about the sightings of the Loch Ness monster or some of the other sea creatures. Sometimes it's spotted. People are lucky they capture some quick video of something or a quick picture. But with it being in the water, I think you see a lot less of that than you do some of the other creatures out there in the wilderness,
Because of the content of the lake, it's stained with peat. Peat is an inky substance, and I believe on average you can only see about 6 feet below Loch Ness's surface. The rest of it is as inky and dark as can be, so it just stains the water, so you can't really see what's going on.
But it always makes me think like that, who knows, like right now, like in the northwest coast, there's this issue with severed feet washing up on the shores, and just they can't find out where it's coming from, So you think about those kind of things. You're like, well, yeah, it could be a crazed serial killer that's chopping people up and I don't know, leaving their shoes. But I mean, literally feet with shoes washing up on the shores, or man, what if something was gobbling them up? That would be, who knows? I don't put anything past anything. After doing this show for a few months, Blake, I leave all possibilities open. But the Loch Ness monster, man, like I said, I had no clue you had that. But was that one of the early ones, or did that come after Nightmare on Elm Street?
It started when I was in college, but I stopped working on it because I ended up going on tour with the band and I signed a record deal. So I was gone for almost 6 years. But once I came back, I started back up. Now, I did finish it in 2021. So it took me about 14 years to finish.
So that's, and dude, also somebody who is in the process of writing right now, I realize how hard and dedication it is to sit down and write something, Because it's like I can't just do it. I have to be in the mood to do it, and my brain's got to be ready to do it, So, which is one of those crazy things. And like I said, to pick a topic like the Loch Ness monster and Nightmare on Elm Street, Freddy Krueger. Hey, I do want to acknowledge people here in the comments. Lisa, good to see you, like always, and welcome, Paul Shields. Hey, welcome to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. If you guys do have any questions, we're getting ready to cut to a break right here in a minute. Coming right up, we'll be cutting to a break. But when we get back, if you guys got any questions for Blake, be sure to put them out here. We'll get them up on the screen, and Blake will answer them the best he can. All right. But thank you guys for showing up here and checking out the show today. But I'll tell you what, Blake, that's what we'll do. We're getting ready to cut to a break for the sponsors. But when we come back, what I need you to do is I want to hear about those paranormal creepy stories. Guys, we'll be right back after these messages.
Have you ever wondered, or maybe just thought to yourself, if there were others just like you? You know, people with extraordinary abilities, psychogenic advancement, and perhaps unique intuitions. Maybe you just wondered if there were other people who experienced unimaginable, unexplained, or even unusual and paranormal events. Are there people who have more questions, more fears than answers? Well, you're not alone. You've never been alone. We believe you. Sign up for EA today.
It's your property. Your assets are worth protecting. Blacklight Investigative and Surveillance Services specializes in patrolling and inspecting residential or commercial property against fire, theft, vandalism, terrorism, and illegal activity. People and buildings are monitored to prevent crime. Keep your property, your people, and your assets safe from threat. Our elite staff are dual licensed private investigators and security guards. Blacklight Investigative and Surveillance Services. Go to blacklightiss.com.
All right, guys, welcome back to Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. And if you guys are just now tuning in, we've been talking with actor, award-winning author, and horror film guru, Blake Best. I tell you what, Blake, now, because we had mentioned earlier, we talked about the books, we talked about some things, but let's talk a little bit about this movie real quick. I want to touch base on this. Blood Splatter. Am I right? Blood Splatter. So let's hear a little bit about Blood Splatter.
Okay, so Blood Splatter is an upcoming film. It's being filmed by DarkHouse Entertainment. So I've been working with DarkHouse for a couple years now. I met them on the set of one of the other films that I did before. And then we struck up a friendship, and I starred in a couple of shorts with them. And then they're actually in the process of filming two new films. So one is Blood Splatter, which is actually in production now. That is what I like to call a basher. So not a slasher, a basher.
A basher.
Yes, the reason I say that is because the killer, who is absolutely terrifying, probably one of the most terrifying characters I've seen in recent years as a killer, he uses a large sledgehammer to go about cleaning house, as it were. So what I can give away, because I have signed NDAs on that, of course, and I've been working on the production for a while. You always have to sign NDAs because you don't want major things leaked. So what I can say is there are a group of friends that get together on Halloween. and they want to hang out, watch movies, eat popcorn, kind of just do what friends do, right? They end up discovering a VHS tape because one of them is a collector, and they end up manifesting a supernatural killer who then comes through the television set into the real world and begins to systematically slaughter every single one of them.
Oh, nice.
And it is absolutely terrifying. And even as a producer and the composer of it, when I was asked to do both of those jobs, I was like, whoa, that's being trusted with a lot of responsibility because I have to, one, produce it and help make sure that everything goes the way it needs to go. So that means I'm in the conference room talking about well, how should this thing be filmed? How should we go about this shot? What do you think about cross cutting into this? How do you feel about the costuming, the kills, that sort of thing? And then being a part of the creative process. And then the other thing I have to do is have to create a soundtrack to this thing, right? And that's been the fun part. Is I was requested by the crew. They wanted something discordant, something notes that don't exactly belong, clashing, um, scary, almost out of tune in places, sort of to kind of further accentuate that otherworldly aspect of the film. So that's what I'm doing with Blood Splatter. So Dark House is filming that right now. I've actually been working on it all week. This is the first day off I've had, so I'm not on set today. I'm here at home. The other film is actually a film that's a horror film. It's based on my life, actually. It's based on how Nightmare on Elm Street has affected me, and it's called Blake's Krazy Nightmare. I'm actually starring in that one. So essentially, I'm playing a version of myself. I'm working on a new Nightmare book because the fans have been clamoring for another book, and me wanting to do what the fans want and take care of their concerns, I start writing a new book. Well, after that, I start having trouble sleeping because I put myself into this mindset, this space, right? This Freddy Krueger space. And then it gets bad to where I end up having to go to a therapist. I'm sleeping maybe 1 or 2 hours a day. I'm drinking caffeine like it's going in style. I stop working on the book for a short time and begin to pick up on something else, but then I get visited by the man with the razor right hand himself, and he says, if you don't finish this and tell the story I want to be told, you won't ever tell another story again, and there won't be anybody else around to listen to it either. So you better do what I say, because if I don't, your friends are all going to meet the business end of my glove. And the glove in question is one I helped design with Flaming Creations. This is the hero glove that the Freddy Krueger actor wears on this. So it is
Oh, dude,
pretty
that
horrifying. Isn't it?
the
Isn't it
actual
wild?
Freddy Krueger.
Yeah.
That's
And I always have to put them on, It's the real deal, my friend.
nice.
But yeah, so those are the two films I'm working on right now.
Now, do you have like a release date for any of them, or?
It's looking to be around Halloween for Blood Splatter. Blake's Crazy Nightmare is going to be very ambitious, so there's no definite release date on that. We're taking our time on this one because it literally is going to be. I'm putting myself in very uncomfortable situations to make this thing happen and make it be as authentic as possible, which means there's going to be some locations that I'm not really happy about going to. Um, there are, late nights. I shot some test footage after a convention I was at in the area, so it's being shot in the Knoxville area. That I can say. And after a convention I had up there, I ended up shooting until almost 4 o'clock in the morning after working for 2 days straight at a convention. So it's been around the clock nightmares for me.
A lot of work, a lot of blood, sweat, and tears.
Absolutely, but there's a good crew. I mean, David Brandon is a visionary. He is the director of the film and one of the driving forces at Dark House. And it's really amazing. Like I said, I met him on the set of He Comes to Kill. He was producing and doing some work on that one. And after I filmed my stuff for that film, later on we met up again, and he just had all these great ideas, and he had sort of the beginnings of a script. He sent me 40 or 50 pages of it, and I read it, and I was like, "Whoa, this is ambitious. This is not what I was expecting it to be. Let's do it." I mean, it kind of grabbed me and held me there, sort of like the Freddy claw would if it popped out of a mattress on you. It just grabs you and holds you there. So I was like, let's do it. Let's really do this. So we took our time, got location secured, went through all of that, working with some great camera crew, working with a great company. So uh, Kevin Kime, of course, is part of that. J.R. Folks is a part of that. Joe Castellan is actually the one playing Freddy Krueger. And I've worked with him on a couple of projects. He's a great actor. And then, Kofi Jones, of course, and it just, the list goes on. It's a small crew, but I really like working with a smaller crew because I feel like those moments that we have are really authentic and you can really get to know everyone else on the smaller crew better. Because I've worked on some crews where there were 300 or 400 people that I had to go through and see every day. And I'm just like, I'm struggling to remember names yet. But on a smaller scale, I can remember those names a lot easier and kind of get to know everyone. And it's an amazing company. I'm proud to be working with them. And, they've asked me to produce, they've asked me to compose. I'm starring in another one of the pictures. I starred in a short they did called The Sacrifice. And then I was a producer on a little short they did called The Treat. Both of those are more found footage style horror films. Very well shot, very creepy. I love how Dark House and David both used lighting as almost like another character. So I'm just excited about working with Dark House. Dark House is a great company, and I encourage everyone to hit them up on Facebook. Dark House Entertainment.
Absolutely, DarkHouse Films. Well, let's do this because you're engulfed in a world of creepy, with the movies and the books and whatnot. But and how we mentioned earlier how life is crazier, creepier, scarier, stranger than fiction. Uh Blake, do you have any of your own personal stories maybe you'd like to share? Any paranormal experiences, anything like that? We would love to hear it.
Sure, absolutely, absolutely. And I thank you for giving me the chance to share. It's not something I share a lot, but uh, these encounters shaped not just my life but my writing career. I ended up writing a book, partially inspired by some of them, and the book is called Whispers in the Woods, which is exactly what I heard. Okay, let's start it with that.
Oh, wow, nice.
Yes. So the first place that I was at a very well-known sanatorium in Kentucky called Waverly Hills,
Yes.
and I explored the grounds. Took a tour, did some exploring, and there were some things that I saw and that I heard that stayed with me. This experience happened in 2014, and it has stayed with me almost 10 years. I mean, almost to the day. Um, so I took some pictures, and I did send you some of those through another means of social media. So what I did was I went on a tour and I went upstairs to an area that was like a filing area. So back in the days when the sanatorium was active, treated tuberculosis patients and tried to help them find a better quality of life while also trying to find a cure for tuberculosis because it ravaged a lot of people during that time. We're talking even as recent as the 1950s and 60s. The sanatorium was still in use. So there was a filing area, and I happened to see out of the corner of my eye something. I didn't know what it was. I just thought it's no electricity in here. It's settling, and we're getting ready to hit dusk. It could have been a trick of the light, but I turned and I looked, and my wife stopped. Lisa, who you've met before, she stopped. She's like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Don't move. Look where I'm looking. Look ahead. Stand with me, right where I am, and look in this room." And we looked, and there was a lady filing paperwork. And at first I thought, why is this lady filing paperwork? The sanatorium's been closed down since the 70s. They're renovating it. What is she doing up there? And then when she turned to look at me, I realized that I could see through her into the wall behind her, which had
Wow.
a frayed poster or something that was hanging there. It was in this office, and I was like, oh my God, what am I looking at here? And I wasn't scared of her. I was more unnerved because when she turned to look at me, it was one fluid motion like this. And it was almost otherworldly. And I was like, what am I looking at? So I snapped a couple of quick pictures. And then when she closed the filing cabinet, she just went away like she was never there. I mean, I can't say she vaporized. That's not the right word. It's almost like she stepped into a forming mist, and the mist enveloped her. That's the best way I can put it. And it gave me chills for sure. It was wild. There was another instance where we went into the children's ward because unfortunately there were children that were afflicted with tuberculosis, and there were toys left in there, old toys. This room has been neglected, and obviously no electricity. It's just everything sitting. So they let us go through there. And there was a ball in there that I saw, and it was the only thing I saw in the room that looked like it had been moved around. It didn't have a thick layer of dust on it, and it just casually rolled over and touched
Oh,
my wife's boot, and then she rolled it back. And then the rest of the party that was with us in the tour, they came in the room, and then all of a sudden, more toys started flying around. There was like a seesaw, like a sawhorse type thing that was on a rope. It went sliding around the floor, and this is all one. The only way into this room is the door we came in, because everything else was screened in windows. They believe treating tuberculosis could be treated best by breathing fresh air. So they had everything kind of covered with this uh, mesh steel, covering, but you could still see the outside and still breathe the air. And then I heard the whisper, and it was a little boy, and he whispered, and he said, "Ball," and I was like, "Indeed, yes it is. There's a ball there." And then our tour guide took out something to film everything, like audio and stuff, and you could hear it. You could hear them laughing. You could hear the whispers of all these kids. And if you walk in the room in the middle, you could feel things like areas of the room that were cold. And then you step back and it's 80 degrees again because there's no electricity in here in this sanitarium. It's in the middle of summer, July. And it was just the wildest thing I'd ever seen. And then we got a shadow, what I call a shadow creature, coming out of a doorway, and it just phased through the brick behind it. We went through the morgue and got to see where, unfortunately there's a tunnel called the death tunnel, where they would send under the ground people that had passed from the disease, so that the live patients didn't have to see their fellow patients and possible friends and family they had succumb to the illness. So they had this thing underground that's about a mile long. That was creepy. I didn't see anything in there, but I felt it. I felt death. I felt cold. I
well,
felt,
first of all, was this all on the same investigation, Blake?
yes, it was all in the same investigation.
Wow.
I never experienced anything like that before in my life. And then apparently we went to the third floor and we heard noises near the elevator. The elevator's been out of commission since the 80s. So at one point there were two night guards that worked during the 80s, and there was a person that was a drifter that moved from place to place that lived in there with a little dog. And they had been seeing this person living in there for all this time, always been very kind, waved to them. It was an older man and this little poodle. And then one night, they stopped seeing him. So the next day, they talked to the person that was there during the day, and they said, "We don't know. We haven't seen him either. I mean, maybe he left because of all the movement we're doing." They were knocking walls out, trying to convert it into a hotel at the time, which eventually fell through. That didn't even happen. So they said, "Well, what could have happened to him?" So they know he moved on, to another place, which is, they're like, "Okay, fine." Well, they go and they're making rounds on the third floor. This is, I want to say, mid 80s, and all of a sudden they hear a racket, some kind of noise near the elevator. And the elevator at that point still working, but they don't hear the elevator itself. They just hear a noise in there. So they got together, these two guys, and they pulled it apart, and there they looked down with their flashlights and they found the man. He was deceased, as was his animal, and he had been killed.
Oh man.
His throat was slit. And they did the same thing to the animal too.
Oh, it's always worse
And
when they do it to the
ever
animal.
since then, they closed the third floor down. They very rarely opened it up. We got lucky and got in there on a night where they were going to do once a night They usually do 5 or 6 tours. Once a night they go through that third floor. And then we went through the children's ward again, where there was a nurse that had an affair with the doctor and found out she was with child. The doctor wasn't going to leave his wife, and the doctor wanted nothing to do with him, so she ended up finding a way out of things, for lack of a better word, right there in that area. So we got to see where that happened. It was scary.
Gosh, that was and was. Now let me back up real quick to the apparition that you saw, the ghost, because there's a lot of people who, they'll investigate the paranormal their entire life and never actually get to see a real, spirit form, kind of like what you saw. Did your wife Lisa, did she see it with you?
Um, she did. Most of the things she saw. There was one spot where we got separated, and I took some photos on my own. And then we were only separated for maybe 10 minutes. But when I was separated from her, I can put it to you this way, Danny. I got the instant feeling when I stepped away from her and went into that other room. You don't need to be in here. And if you stay in here, you're going to wish you didn't come in here. So immediately I turned around and I went back. And at night, everything kind of looks the same, in there. And that was the only time I ever felt really, really real, accurate fear. I had one other instance as a child, before my grandfather passed away, where I was warned ahead of time by another relative of his that had passed away that it was coming. And that was scary because I didn't know who it was until I looked at photos later. He was in the Navy. His name was RC. He was my grandmother's brother, really close friends with my grandfather. And he passed in a car wreck in the 70s. In 1971, he was hit by a drunk driver right in Kentucky, and he passed at like 44 years old. He warned me that it was coming, and within 3 to 4 days of him warning me, my grandfather succumbed to a heart attack. On a night I was supposed to stay at his house with him. I woke up not feeling well that day, and I told my parents, I don't want to go. I'm not feeling great. I don't want him to be sick. Well, I think part of that was a warning because I shudder to think what would have happened if I would have been there. It might not have changed anything. I could have very well woken up next to him being deceased, and there's no telling what that would have done to me. So I've always had a tremendous respect and a very, very healthy fear of things I don't understand. And that's not something I understood, but I did understand he meant me no harm. He touched me on my foot and he patted me and he moved his mouth. I couldn't hear anything, but in my mind I'm thinking he was saying it's okay. It's time for him to go. He's lived a good life, and you're one of the best things that happened to him. So just trying to tell you he's going to go to someplace better than where he is now, and he'll never forget you. It was a warm feeling. It wasn't a feeling of dread or sorrow. It was now once it happened, of course, I was very sorrowful. I mean, I grieved that for years, but that warning, I'm glad that I got it because it helped prepare me for something.
Yeah, and those things happen all the time with people and their loved ones. You hear those stories a lot. I remember my grandmother on her when she was passed away. She looked over in the corner and saw her baby brother who died when he was just 6 years old. And she was just having a conversation with him right there in the room full of all of us in the hospital room. So I mean, I believe stuff like that 100%. But like I said, I think some people are a little more sensitive when they have their doors and their windows open to this type of world, which you absolutely do. And I find that extraordinary that you went to Waverly and you saw and you got to experience the things that you experienced. That's incredible.
It is. And it influenced this book, Whispers in the Woods, which answers another question. I love history. So inside this book, if you ever get a chance to read it, though it is a horror book, there are some things in there. So you find out what happened to the missing Roanoke colony.
Oh yeah, that's a great story too. Yeah,
very much so. When they came to settle, one of their own went back. The governor went back for supplies and came back, and they were nowhere to be found. That was supposed to be Roanoke, Virginia, but they actually say it was in between Roanoke, Virginia, and North Carolina where that occurred. So I like to say that this book is Appalachian ghost story gone wrong. So legends about a mysterious disappearance and rumors of a curse don't stop these teens from entering the wilderness, but there's something wrong in the woods. The friends will soon learn the woods hold a dark secret, one it would kill to keep.
Well, okay, well, let's do this because we're almost out of time here, Blake. So,
right.
Okay, we've got 3 books. We've got The Razor's Edge.
Yeah.
We've got Whispers in the Woods. And what was our Loch Ness?
Fathom.
Yeah,
right here. Oh, too many books. Yeah.
There we go. We got 3 amazing books, folks. We also have got a great movie that's going to be coming out, Blood Splatter. And that is with DarkHouse Entertainment, correct?
Yes, it is.
I tell you what, if you can, let the viewers and the listeners know where they can learn more about Blake Best and his projects.
Well, social media seems to be the winner. Follow me on social media. You can follow me at my official celebrity author page is facebook.com/Blake Best Horror. You can find out all my convention appearances there. I'm represented by TriStar Appearances and also by Paul Bachman. They take care of my convention stuff. And then you can find out about more from me on my other social media page, which is just search Blake Best, and you'll find me. I've got a glove on in the picture, kind of making a goofy face at the camera. And then I've got website, blakebestauthor.wixsite.com/Blake Best Horror. It's got all my books, music, everything else. DarkHouse Entertainment on Facebook. Hit them up. Follow them. Give them a like. Blood Splatter has an official page, the movie page on Facebook. So definitely, if you find DarkHouse, you'll find me. And vice versa. So I'm always posting about those things.
So yeah, either find DarkHouse, we'll find Blake. I tell you what, Blake, man, it's always a great time talking to you, brother. I know we'll bump into each other somewhere at a convention, but man, I just want to say thank you so much for coming on the Beyond the Tinfoil Hat.
Thank you for having me, and whatever you do, don't fall asleep. Right?
Ooh. All right, guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. If you guys get a chance, be sure to check out Blake Best, like I said, on his social media, and check out this new movie, Blood Splatter, when it comes out. I'm sure it'll be streaming everywhere. And check out some of Blake's books, man. Some really cool stories. Loch Ness Monster, Nightmare on Elm Street, and Whisper in the Woods. You can't go wrong with that. Some really cool stories in those books. But also, if you guys haven't done so, like and share this podcast, this episode. Tell your friends about it. And get over to Patreon and give us some love and heed the world. Guys, we are broadcasting live from the E-United Public Radio Network, the UFO Paranormal Radio Network on 105.3 FM on the Gulf Coast and 107.7 FM New Orleans. Guys, this is Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. I've been your host, Danny Whitson. I'll see you guys next time. All right, that does it for this episode of Beyond the Tinfoil Hat. A big shout out for tonight's awesome guest, and a bigger shout out for everyone who tuned in. And if you haven't done so yet, be sure to subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever it is you listen to your podcasts. And like always, be sure to stay curious, heed the world, and keep the paranormal normal. I'm your host, Danny Whitson, and this has been Beyond the Tinfoil Hat.